Okay guys, so welcome back to Exotic Car Hacks, and today I'm going to do something I've never really done, which is have a reaction to something that's been going on in the news, which is a famous Gembala GT crash in the middle of New York. Now, typically I don't do videos like this because I genuinely don't give a flying fuck what happened to people and what is going on the internet, because it's just one other way to drive views or hits, etc. But there was something fundamentally wrong with a lot of the videos I've seen react to this particular video, which was a video of some particular person that I'm not going to name here that crashed their Gembala Mirage Carrera GT in the middle of New York during a pandemic by acting recklessly and going and being on drugs and ultimately getting a couple accidents, still taking off, and then having all of a sudden all charges dropped for no apparent reasons, meaning it didn't go to trial, nothing happened. But the real issue I had with I guess what's been going on online wasn't actually the fact that all charges were dropped, it was the fact that people were actually very surprised by the fact that all charges were dropped. And that became something that just I decided to do a video on, because a lot of my background comes with, my previous books, etc., with third circle theory, etc., talking about entrepreneurship, awareness, consciousness, and more importantly, understanding what is happening around you. And so to everybody's surprise there, like the charges were dropped and no charges further were filed, and basically the person that got in this crazy car accident that ruined their own cars and a couple other cars were suddenly let go, even though of course people were paid and things were done to rectify the situation, it seems. But nonetheless, the person was not even put on trial for any given reason, and that brought up a lot of people's disappointment, and basically people saying, well, that's what happens when you have a lot of money and you can just basically buy yourself out of any issue. And the part that really surprised me from everybody's reaction was the fact that many people didn't understand that concept. There's a lot of people in this world right now that truly believe that the entire justice system and everything around it is built off of this idea of equality. And the reality is, it really isn't built off of equality. It never was. And I think that's why I decided to do this video, was basically to share my thoughts about what people's misconception of how the universe works, or how should I say society works, is what leads them to very outrageous reactions to things that aren't really that outrageous at all. I mean, did you really believe that the justice system worked the same for every single person? Have you not looked at just how it worked for black people versus white people versus brown people versus Chinese people? Like, I mean, think about it. Like, just think about the entire way the system has worked to this time. Why are you surprised that the common denominator in people getting away with crimes has always and will always be money? Like, it's always been the case. The richest of people always get away with the most. And partially, that's not because their crimes are any less severe or anything else. I mean, we saw this with the Black Lives Matter movement. We saw this all over TV for the last 4 years, right? People rioting for justifiable reasons. We're not talking about looting. Those guys should all be taken down and beaten to crap. But I'm talking about just basic people rioting peacefully and getting fired on and getting beat down by government and by police, versus people rioting, hurting people, not even looting stores. We're talking about beating down cops and not being beat back at the Capitol. So like, and those guys were basically white and the other guys were black. And as soon as a black guy basically does something, it's a huge issue. But if a white guy does something, it's basically like, oh, he's probably having a bad day. How can I calm this down? And so it's always been two facades. It's always been rich versus poor and racial inequality. It's always been the case. But in many cases, even racial inequality can be beat by money. No one often has a problem with a really rich Asian guy, and no one really has a problem with a really rich black guy. The only issues they really have are with the poverty side of other races. And the only other issue they have is the core basis. This is the part that people understand, with the idea of poverty, not the idea of race. First, it's wealth, then it's race. But it's never, ever been any different. So for anybody that ever thought that it was surprising that all charges were dropped in the very basic instance that this person got in a car accident, continued to do stupid shit with their car, and continued to go on, well, This is just the way the world works. It's always been the way the world works. And so your possibility here, the reason I'm saying this to you is because many of you watching things on YouTube are fairly young or individuals who perhaps haven't experienced the world for what it is. Let me give you a very good piece of advice about how the world works. Stop worrying so much about what other people are doing and spend the decade, 2 decades, 3 decades of your life fighting, not for equality, but for tilting the system. And the way you tilt the system is by becoming really rich. Because first, before you can tilt the system one way, you got to get it to tilt in your favor. You see, when I was much younger, I was very, very poor. And so I had to learn that if I didn't make money, I would 100% not be in a position, 100% not be in a position to tilt the world in my favor. So one of the things I'm telling you right now is that if you're watching this video, stop getting surprised at people's reactions that charges were dropped. Stop falling victim to the idea that clickbait and it's unequal. The world has never been equal. This country has never been equal, and it never will. The world has always tilted to always benefit those who have mastered the system. And the mastery of the system in society comes from money. So learn to make money and never fall victim to other people's stupid shit. And that's my take on that video. I don't think I give a shit why they were dropped or what happened or how unequal the system is. I'm just giving a shit about the fact that you out there are surprised that charges were dropped against a person who legitimately born into or not into money, which is completely irrelevant here to the situation, has money. And when we're talking about you have the tunes of 9 to 10 figures worth of money, there's a lot of tilting to be done in your favor, regardless that you go and decide all of a sudden that the damage you've done not only is going to be paid back, but there's also going to be a handsome donation done to the police department and to the other individuals involved and everything else. And then the question was, well, you basically reversed out everything you damaged. If you went to a person whose van you crashed into and you go, listen, I lost my $1 million car, you lost your $10,000 van, I'm going to buy you a $100,000 van. I'm going to give you $50,000 in your pocket just so you forget it, because me having these things against me is going to cost me a lot more in the long term than just this $100,000 I'm going to give you to rectify your problem. And one of the things people don't understand is that money is the driver of change. And so if that person's life changed, they weren't impacted, they weren't hurt. If their life changed in a better way as a result of that, then the money solved the problem. There's no more of a need to pursue this other than the illusion of equality. Justice was never and has never and will never be equal in all men's favor unless you understand that justice has one common denominator like everything else, and that's money. So a little bit off topic, click subscribe, click like. I'll see you in the next video. Be well.